Time now for the nationally syndicated radio show, The World of Laurie Zoock. And now, here she is, the smart, the sexy, the savvy, divine Miss C.
Yes, I am the Laurie Zoock. Welcome to my world. On my show, you're going to hear from real people, real stories, and real topics of interest. Not what you hear on the other stations, not what commercial sponsors tell their hosts to say. You're going to hear the real things. And in this segment, I want to talk about dating. Because dating is something that seems to have changed for the worse, I think, over the years. It's crazy. No one knows what to do, what the rules are, and how to behave. Now, I know ML Harris, very, very good professional photographer and also an author. He's written great fictional books that I've read that have just kept me reading, and I can't put the books down. And Michael has recently written a couple of books on dating. So, ML, the Understanding Women book, let's talk about that because you're a man. So how do you know about understanding women and dating?
Hi, Laurie. Thanks for having me on the show. Well, that's a great question. First of all, I have 8 daughters, and I've been married twice. And I have probably 25 really close platonic female friends. And over the course of the last 20 years, I've kind of become a coach for women. And, they call me up and they ask, they can't understand men, and they ask me. And then finally they suggested, why don't you write a book about this so that we have something we can have in front of us? And that's how it came about. And a component of that is dating. It's not a book about dating. It's a book about understanding men, like I have one for men, Understanding Women. But let's talk about the women's book today, Understanding Men,
okay.
The component of dating. And I think that women make a lot of mistakes as far as communicating with men. And let's talk about that, because before a date can happen, a man has to make a contact with a woman. Before he can make a contact with a woman, he has to know how to flirt. Flirting is the setup for communication with women. Men don't know this. They flirt with women so that they can, get with her or hook up with her, as the expression goes today.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not the purpose of flirting as it should be, and that's not the purpose of how women want men to flirt with them. So the flirt comes, and once the flirting is proper, and then the guy goes, hey, I want to, let's go to dinner, a woman should then put the brakes on and say, you know what, let's meet at Starbucks for coffee. Let's go, I'll meet you at Starbucks for coffee. I can do that Tuesday at 10 or maybe Friday at 3 p.m., which works best for you, if he says that. And the reason why you want to do that is so the woman can go over her deal breakers list.
I see. So it's more of a short upfront meeting to see if there's any connection, rather than spend the whole time at dinner so that you're then stuck with the person if you're really not interested.
Exactly, and they should look at it, and my book points all this out, as a qualifying process. I call it vetting, vetting. The way that vetting seems to be the word of the 21st century. Politicians get vetted, people in corporations get vetted, people that go for job interviews get vetted. So I teach the women how to properly vet the man for another date. So during that time of going through her mental deal breakers, which I teach her how to make a deal breakers list, and to basically memorize that list so that when she goes there, he doesn't feel like he's being interviewed.
It's interesting you say that, because years ago when I was dating, to me it always was an interview. A lot of women seem to think it's about the men choosing them, but really it's about people choosing each other, and the woman has to choose the man back, correct?
Well, the women do. This is a misconception, I think, with a lot of men and women. Women do the choosing. Men don't do the choosing. Now, men would love to be able to do the choosing. I choose her, and she's going to marry me. We're going to ride off to the sunset happily ever after. It doesn't work that way. Women do the choosing. And in my book about men, I teach men how to handle that. But right now, we're focused on women.
Right.
So it's very important that they do this coffee date, and they can determine how many coffee dates do they want to have before they even go to lunch, breakfast, or dinner with a guy.
Okay.
The next thing about dating they need to do, which they probably haven't done, is to throw up some hoops for him to jump through. For example, in this day and age, a lot of guys are chicken, and so they text asking for a date by text. And I teach my women clients, don't even respond to a text like that. That's insulting.
That to me is so off the wall. I mean, and you hear stories about people breaking up on texting or Facebook. Where's the etiquette and the manners? Are younger people being brought up that way? Because old school, you want both people to have class, but there are certain rules.
God, it's interesting you bring that up, because in the introduction to this book on understanding men, and the subtitle is What Every Woman Needs to Know, in the introduction I explain the whole history from America from 1776 and bring it fast forward to today on what's happened with men, with dating, with courtship. So yeah, they need to we men, including myself, need training. And the way we get trained is by smart, intelligent, great women. And they train us by making us jump through hoops. So if a guy texts for a date that's totally inappropriate, it would be as inappropriate if he made an inappropriate comment. So you don't respond to that. And you train the man. Then if the guy texts and goes, hey, I've sent you several texts and you didn't text me back, what's going on? And then if she's a little bit interested, she might text back and say, you know what, I don't do well with texting. Here's my phone number. You already have give me a call, and we'll talk. If I'm not available, drop a message in my voicemail, and I'll get back to you. She wants to train him to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad because nowadays, people send me messages through Facebook, ML, that I just am freaked out over. Someone's very, very sick. They don't pick up the phone and call you. And again, maybe, I don't know if it's so much age determinant to doing it, but whatever happened to actually socializing? Because Facebook is really antisocial if you think about it.
We became lazy, and texting makes everything so easy. We have microwave ovens. We have a microwave age. Turn on the television. We've got a remote that can surf through 149 different channels almost instantly. So we have to go back to the Victorian age almost, of what I call courtship. And the woman is going to have to train the man to court her, and she can do that by specific actions. Okay,
tell me about those actions.
Well, the number one action is that if a man, let's say, she texts him and tells him to call her, and he calls her and he goes, hey, listen, would you like to get together and do something sometime? Then she should chuckle and say, look, I'm a very busy person. Why don't you come up with a plan and then get back to me? Oops, gotta run. Talk to you later. Bye.
Got it.
Okay, so he's got to come up. He's got to
work for it.
Women are about feelings. And that made her feel unimportant, not special, and so she needs to feel special. Women need to be pursued. Men are supposed to be the pursuers, and men have quit pursuing. If it's too much trouble, they don't do it. They quit. So women have to retrain us. And the way she does that is by that phone conversation. Now he might hang up and go, boy, what a bitch. But the thing is that, okay, bye. Then she just 86'd him, which means she marked him off her list. He has to earn his way onto her list. He has to jump through the hoops to even get a date.
Yeah, it's about respect, isn't it? It's respect.
It is about respect and making her feel special. And so the proper way for a man to date, which I teach the men in my book for men, would be for him to plan something that makes her feel special. He doesn't have to spend $500 or $1,000 on her, but make her feel special. He could say something like this on that coffee thing. She should say to him, what do you like to do when you're not working and you're just doing stuff that you like to do? What do you like to do? And he goes, well, I like kayaking. then she should immediately, if she likes that, or think, she goes, wow, that sounds like a lot of fun. And her body language and everything would let him know that, okay, he can ask her out for a date on kayaking instead of going to a movie or dinner or something boring. Do something different. Let her get involved in his lifestyle. Well, he might say, I'm in a scuba diving club. Then she could say, even if she's never done that, wow, that sounds like fun.
Right.
She's training him by her communication back to him.
Yeah, it brings back the respect and the class and the etiquette that seem to be missing. And I don't know that parents teach their kids or their boys when they're growing up, open the door for the woman. And listen, there are a lot of feminists who would say that that's not right. But you know what? There's just a certain presumption of class. And
well, the problem is either their parents or their, depending on their age, or their grandparents are baby boomers. And baby boomers were all about sex, drugs, alcohol, free love, do whatever you want, anti-everything. So they didn't have any rules. But the group before that came out before the baby boomers, which would be prior to 46, those parents, and they knew courtship. And they might write a letter that took 7 days to get there and said, I'll be calling on you on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. on July the 15th, announcing that he's going to be contacting her at home. And then there would be an anticipation and a build-up. And then when he got there, he would ask permission to be able to speak with the daughter of the father out on the porch. And then he might have to do that 2 or 3 times until he got invited home to the Sunday dinner. Well, that's all gone. And the whole thing about, sex being the cart before the horse. So I'm trying to train women how to train us and how to make us respect them and give us the respect they deserve.
I think you're right in everything you said. So tell me the name of the book and where you can get it.
Okay, this particular book is called Understanding Men, What Every Woman Should Know, and it's available at Amazon.com. They can just go to Amazon, type that in, Understanding Men, and hit enter, and it should take them right to my book. And the book is affordable at $6.99.
Well, that's a bargain for what it's going to give you. So I want to thank you, ML, for joining me, and we'll take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment. Next question, Paul.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Welcome back to the World of Laurie Zoock. I've got another great guest on my show right now. Now, he's a private investigator, Al Verile. He's with Sharpline Investigations. Now, I read an interesting story recently about GPS tracking devices having new restrictions under Florida law. And I think it's important to mention because a lot of times people buy these devices to track maybe their partner, whether they're married or not, to track or trace people. Sometimes the intent is not good. So Al, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Lori.
And talk to me a little bit about the new law and what's going on with these GPS track. And you know what? Let's actually start out with GPS tracking devices. Explain what they are and who can get them.
Yeah, GPS tracking devices are. They can come in any sizes and shapes. They can be very small as well. Basically, anybody can get them. You can buy them online. You can buy them in stores. And plainly put, is when these devices are placed on vehicles or on individuals, it will relay a signal as to where that person is actually at. So if I put a GPS tracking device on your vehicle, I'm going to get up-to-date information on where your vehicle is actually parked, where it's traveling to. So it could be a very intrusive device if not used properly.
Now, does it count as a GPS tracking device? I've seen on some of these online security product stores where they have devices you can put on the inside of somebody's phone. Is that also tracking, or okay?
Correct. Yeah, and you can utilize those devices, and that actually is covered within this bill as well. It encompasses anything that tracks somebody's movement or activity. So
who
would still fall into this?
Yeah, who typically uses these devices? And if you have any stories, I'd love to hear one.
They're used in law enforcement. They use them in law enforcement. They use them in private investigations. They can be used in any capacity. They even use them in with the elderly. So if you have somebody who's suffering from dementia, there's little bracelets that can be put on somebody that can give you an accurate location on where that person has gone. So if they go missing from a nursing home facility and there's concern of where that person's at because they have Alzheimer's, they don't remember, dementia, whatever the case may be, these devices are actually very helpful. And this law does not prohibit devices used in that capacity. What it does prohibit is use for private investigators and individuals tracking other individuals without their consent.
Okay, so as a private investigator, if you need to track somebody, basically you can't use this device, correct?
Yes and no. If I wanted to track some random person's vehicle for a client, yes, I could not use that. I could not use that device tracking that vehicle. However, if the vehicle is owned by that person hiring us, then at that point they have ownership of that vehicle. We have the ability to put that tracking device on that vehicle. So yes, in that regard we could. In the other instance where they don't own the vehicle, we cannot.
Okay, now what if it's from the sheriff's or the police department and they're trying to track a victim? Same rules apply? They can't use that type of tracking device?
Yeah, their rules are a little slightly different. And I haven't really looked into the law too much for as far as law enforcement goes, because they kind of, a lot of their things require search warrants. I don't believe this one actually requires a search warrant for law enforcement, and it doesn't. The actual rules do not apply for law enforcement as far as this bill goes. So, and that's a funny thing about it is this law doesn't apply specifically to law enforcement and business entities. However, those are the exceptions within this law. However, we're considered business entity as well, private investigators, but in there specifically states that the exception does not apply to private investigators. So that exception saying that you can use them if you're a business acting in good faith, they left that pretty broad. So it says good faith. But like I said, we're considered a business entity, but yet we still can't use us because we're private investigators unless we have a consent.
Okay, what happens if I wanted to, for example, track my husband? I thought he was doing something. Could I still use that device, or now it would be illegal for me also?
Yeah, you have to ensure that you own that vehicle.
Okay.
And it says in the law that you have to be the owner of the vehicle, the title holder. You have to show some kind of ownership of that vehicle. And that's why we ask a lot of our clients for cheating spouse investigations. We ask them, do you have your name on the title, or are you on that vehicle as showing the owner? Because we don't want any discrepancies if it has to be brought to court.
I see. So in other words, if they weren't in a vehicle with the owner's name on it, tracking it that way, you would physically have to be tracking that person by following them in your car.
Yes, and that's the quote unquote old school method, is physically following somebody, and that's fine. We're trained in doing that. We actually prefer that method, and that's what we still use to this day. So, and even before this law, it was more so an ethical issue, and you could have used the tracking device on anybody's vehicle. There really wasn't a law set in place, saying that you couldn't. So it was more, like I said, an ethical dilemma whether or not you were going to use them. And prior to this law, we never used them unless the person has, provided us consent or they had ownership of that vehicle.
I see. It almost sounds to me like it's an invasion of privacy type rule.
It is, yeah, and that's what the bill is getting at. They're trying to limit the invasion of privacy, but they're also trying to protect individuals. And the reason being is this: if you put a tracking device, if you call me up and you say, my ex-husband, I want to track him, I want to know where he's at, and I, as a private investigator, say, sure, you don't have ownership of that vehicle. I put a tracking device on his vehicle, and you find out where he's located. Now, he may have an injunction against you. Now you're violating that injunction, which is set in place to protect him from you, or protect you from him. And once you find him, you can do harm to him, hurt him, kill him, etc. And that's where they had a lot of issues with people knowing exactly where maybe domestic violence, victims are, and that person is finding them and doing harm to them. So that's why they're having these strict regulations for the private investigation industry as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's an anti-stalking law.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Basically, that's what it comes down to.
Okay, because I was reading an article and it said that this happened last year in New York, that a woman was murdered by her ex-boyfriend, who had placed a hidden GPS tracking device on her car. So technology is changing so rapidly. Do you think that the laws are keeping up with the technology, or they're really slow and it's taking a long time, and meantime bad things are happening to people?
Yeah, it's absolutely not keeping up with technology. There's no way they can. Literally, GPS tracking devices have been out. They've been out. This is not something that just came out recently. GPS tracking devices have been out. So, and it really is, I don't want to say impossible, but it's close to impossible to be able to keep up with the laws to kind of parallel with the technology coming out, because, technology, technology is advancing so quickly that the laws, by the time they get the laws passed, they're taking months, sometimes a year to pass some of these laws. There's revisions. So there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that they have to do that doesn't really allow them to put a law into effect by, the same day they think of it, to be able to put it in effect that next day. So, yes, they're not going to be able to keep up with the advancement of technology as we continue to grow.
All right, and Jeff has a question here for you. Shoot, Jeff.
I was wondering about drones, that's fairly new in the market. Tracking somebody with a drone with a GPS. Now, where does that fall into the law?
Yeah, and they actually just came out with the bill, and surprisingly, it took effect today, July 1st, 2015. And that's going to be I think it's a Senate Bill 766. That's the drone. It pertains to drones. That is considered illegal as well. That's something that they've, it's been in the talks for a while. The whole bill for the drones. And that's something that they've made illegal, today. It's actually like I said, it's in effect today. But yeah, that would be, it falls under the invasion of privacy. So, basically, if you're tracking somebody via a drone, you're going to be in violation of that law unless you, are considered one of the exemptions. And like I said, this law has a similar exemption like the, GPS tracking. There's exemptions for businesses. But like I said, it goes back to private investigators being in a business also. But in the law, it states that if you're a business and your sole purpose is tracking individuals, finding out their daily habits, their movements, etc., you're not going to be exempt from this law. So, and that's what we do. We track people's movements, habits, and pretty much where they are. So we are not exempt from that law. We still have to abide by that law, and if we do use drones, we can be held liable for them.
Now, what kind of are there monetary fines for violators? Is there jail time for violators? What happened?
Yeah, and this is a new law, so it's kind of surprising to see what would happen, how strict they will be on this. It's going to be up to the court system again. It's going to come up down to the court, and they're going to have to show, for say example, a GPS tracking device. If they find a GPS tracking device on a vehicle, who's to say that you physically put that tracking device? There's going to be a lot of discrepancies on proving how that GPS tracking device got there. There's ways to track that device back to somebody. However, like I said, it's going to be it could be an issue in court on proving for sure if that person did in fact put it on the vehicle. And the same with drones. Drones is it's more so going to be civil action against somebody, so they can civilly sue that individual for the invasion of their privacy and try and get some kind of monetary recourse for that, as far as, saying, hey, you invaded my privacy, and you sue somebody civilly. They didn't mention anything there per se about jail time. I didn't read anything about that. But could it lead to it? It's very possible. Like I said, it just all depends on how aggressive and how strict they are going to be on enforcing these laws. And for private investigators, they're actually, we fall under the statute 493 within the statute book, and they're coming out with a law, not a law rather, but a provision in the statute for grounds for disciplinary action for us. So they're actually making a section in there. It's going to actually be paragraph Y under subsection 1. It's going to state that those laws apply to us, and there's going to be disciplinary actions coming down from the state on us if we're held to be in violation of these bills.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all that information. It sounds like science fiction has come to life with all the things that are happening. So, Al, Sharpline Investigations, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem, Laurie. It's always been great being on your show.
Thank you. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back to the World of Laurie Zoock in just a moment.
Do you suffer from back, neck, or body pain? Do you suffer from migraines or have jaw or face pain? Has conventional medicine failed you? Were you injured or in an accident? Call chiropractic physician Dr. Dan Maddock at 813-935-1664. Dr. Dan has helped thousands of patients gain relief for more than 30 years. Dr. Dan is caring, gentle, and takes his time with each patient. He's also a past president of the International Craniopathic Society, a special certification of only 300 chiropractors worldwide. Dr. Dan helps patients from the neck up and the neck down. Dr. Dan accepts most insurance plans. Don't continue to live in pain. Call 813-935-1664 today. That's 813-935-1664 and get on track to better health.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Hello, I'm Jim Velasquez. Does getting a lousy 1% on your CDs make you sick to your stomach? Inflation is hovering at 3%, so what's really happening? Allow me, Jim Velasquez, to send you my free report. If you haven't reviewed your CDs in a while, don't get this report. It will break your heart. If you want to fight back and beat the bank, text RETIRE to 72727 for this free report. Let's beat the bank. Text RETIRE to 72727 for your free report.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
and you're in my world, the world of Laurie Zoock. And on my show, we talk about real things, real people, real stories. I like educational things. And because I work as a consumer credit consultant, I work with people a lot of times who are working with realtors. They ask me questions I can't answer, which basically comes down to how do I buy a house? And what's the process? Well, I can help you with the credit part. But after that, you've got to work with a realtor and a mortgage person. So I've got my friend Tim Snodgrass. He is a realtor. And Tim's going to answer some of those questions because if you're thinking about buying a house, sometimes people do so blindly. For example, if you have no money, you can't buy a house. If you have no savings, you can't buy a house. But there are steps and there's a process you have to go through. So, Tim, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right, Tim, let's start out with, I come to you and I say, hey, Tim, I want to buy a house. What is the process that I have to go by in order to even get started?
Sure. First, I would like to thank you, and anyone coming to me, I would say thank you because you made the best decision by choosing to come to the real estate professional first. So that is an excellent step. You want to make sure that that real estate person is full-time if they have any specializations in what area they are working in. So once we've talked a little bit, the first question I would have for anyone is, have you spoken to a financing professional? Have you talked to a lender? The lender is really going to be the best and the most important first step for you. They're going to help you tell you how much of a house you can really afford. And also they'll help you work through how much of a house are you comfortable affording. Because oftentimes I've found that some people are qualified to possibly buy a much larger home than what they're comfortable spending. So one of the things that I always recommend before even calling that lender is to really work through your own finances and create a budget for yourself and figure out for all your housing costs, how much are you comfortable spending on a monthly basis. So when you take that to the lender and they have something to work with, besides all the questions they'll ask about your income and your history and other things with your credit, if they know that you're really comfortable spending $1,500, for example, a month, they'll be able to work with you and tell you, okay, in this area with the taxes and insurance and everything else, that's really going to afford you, for example, a $250,000 house. But based on other things, you might be qualified for a $300,000 house. And so it's very good to know really what you're comfortable buying before you even begin to look at any houses.
I'm going to jump in here for a second because I think that's a good point. Years ago when I bought my first house, I remember my father said to me, okay, you got pre-qualified, which really doesn't mean much, right? It's when you figure out what it costs, what it's going to cost for you for that monthly mortgage payment, and what it's going to cost for the insurance and the utilities. And then, of course, you've got car insurance, gas, your entertainment, all of your bills. That kind of gives you a reality check of what you're going to be comfortable with, correct? It's not necessarily what you're pre-qualified for.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And one of the other things that I've found that people sometimes overlook is how much extra cost can go into buying a house. Because most of the time, any house you're going to buy, beyond the closing costs and the inspections and things you might have to purchase along the way that are in conjunction with buying the home, that home usually needs some type of work, or the person just doesn't like the paint, or they want to fix it up. And so one of the most overlooked things is how much that really looks like. Because if you end up spending all of your extra savings and your kind of cushion, if you will, then you can find yourself in the very near future after buying a home in a very tight spot that you might not want to put yourself into.
I think those are good points. The unexpected expenses. When people buy homes, they really need to have backup money. Now, you're younger than me, but I know in my time, I was brought up that you should have 6 months worth of savings that you could live on in the event that you even lost your job. And so if you miss a mortgage payment, well, now you're really in financial trouble because you had no backup. And one of the few things FICO does tell you, Tim, is that if you miss one mortgage payment, It's 100 to 200 points off your score. It kills you. And then you can't refinance because you're now in financial trouble. So I think you're bringing up good points. Now, when people go through that process and they come to you as a realtor, you're connecting them with a mortgage person. You're getting the credit report because I think that also kind of tells you whether or not they're going to qualify for you. Let's say you got past that step. Now, do you go out and take them to see properties at that point?
Well, once they've received what they call a pre-approval letter from the lender, the next step I would also ask them to do before we ever step a foot into a house is to really make a list. And it can be like a T-bar list, if you will. And on one side, you're going to put what you really need in a house. And then on the other side, you want to put what you would want in a house. Because any house you're going to look at, again, unless you're looking at extremely expensive homes, it's rare you're going to find everything you really want in a home. But you need to know what you can and cannot live without. And the realtor that you're working with needs to know that. So if you have 2 large dogs, for instance, a need might be a fenced-in yard. And so if we're looking at homes that don't have a fenced-in yard, we have to know as the real estate professional if you can put up and create a fence and how expensive would that also be. Because otherwise, neither of us want to waste our time looking at a home, falling in love with it, realizing you can't fence in the yard.
Gotcha.
So making a list of what you need and knowing what you want in a home and conveying that to the real estate professional. And then you can begin to really look at homes and in what area, and you can go physically looking at homes and figuring out really what you like and what you don't like in a home.
All right. Now, let's say you find or your client finds a home that they like. At that point, you put in a bid on that property? You make an offer?
Correct. Yes. And again, the one thing I want to stress is that the real estate professional is here to guide and to advise you, but really it's the buyer and the person who's in, they're the ones that are truly in control. So we might advise you of what the property is listed for and what we think a good offer might be, but ultimately you're the one making the decision. This is how much I want to offer for this house. And then the real estate professional will go ahead and create the contracts and make sure all the paperwork is taken care of, and we'll submit that offer on your behalf to the other agent or the homeowner.
All right. Now, let's say that offer it might be negotiated, but eventually an offer is accepted. Now, from that point, what happens? You have appraisals, inspections. What other things is the potential home buyer going to have to pay for, and what order does that go in?
Right. So the next step is that's when the communication with the lender will also come into play, and the real estate professional will work with the lender hand in hand, and we'll help guide the homeowner and advise them to what are the next steps. Usually the first step right away will be to go ahead and order a home inspection. And the home inspection is generally something that a lot of states, the banks want to see. In our state, for instance, it's not always a necessity, but we always recommend a home inspection. And from there, we can find out, any of the flaws that we might have overlooked in the home, any potential hazards. And from there, it gives me a point to go back and renegotiate the contract with the listing agent or the homeowner.
Okay.
And then
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. And then once that is taken care of and we've renegotiated it, then the lender will go ahead and order the appraisal. They'll let us know if there are extra inspections we'll need to order. That home inspection, that appraisal, basically anything that's being ordered, those do end up usually being paid oftentimes at the time the service is rendered, and that does need to be paid by the buyer.
Okay, so at that point, all of these things are done. Then they get a closing date, correct? And at that point, then they can move into the house and they're done.
Right, yeah. After everything comes back, the bank on the mortgage side, they have to go through what's called an underwriting process, and it's someone else overlooking to make sure everything makes sense for the bank. And once they do that, they'll give you what's called a commitment letter. And once we get a commitment letter from a realtor side, that's when we'll go ahead and start looking to, schedule some closing and things like that. Eventually, we'll get the official clear to close, and we'll actually be assigned to set up that date with the title company and or attorneys that you're doing the actual closing with. And there's a couple other things that happen behind the scenes, during that time. But ultimately, they just show up, and the title company, the attorneys, whoever handling that closing process will let them know again how much they're ultimately going to need to bring to close and finish the transaction and receive the keys to their new home.
You just made it so simple in about 10 minutes. You were able to explain everything calmly. You're such a professional and so well-spoken, because most people can't give 10 minutes how you can buy a house. So I want to thank you for joining me. And if we have any listeners in Connecticut, Tim, because that's where you're at now, how can they reach you?
Yeah, thank you very much. And anyone that is looking to move to Connecticut or currently lives here, we do service the entire state, and so you can reach me directly at area code 860-385-4744. Once again, 860-385-4744. Call me directly, or you can go to my website, which is just my name, timsnodgrass.com.
Great. Thanks for joining me, Tim. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back. Stay with us.
Are your credit reports a mess? Are debt collectors hounding you? Maybe you're in foreclosure or headed towards foreclosure and don't know where to turn. It's time to stop panicking. Take back control of your life. Make the first step by calling Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Mention the word radio for a free 15-minute consultation. Don't delay. Call today.
Our highly competitive and hectic world is fraught with dishonesty and challenges. Critical decisions must be made on a daily basis with accuracy when substantial assets are at risk. When you are confronted with a decision point involving opportunity and risk, consult with Sharpline Investigations, statewide experts in due diligence, investigations, and litigation support. Sharpline's professionals work with clients to conduct interviews, deep background investigations, and develop facts and intelligence related to litigation. When circumstances require confidential and expert fact-finding, turn to Sharpline Investigations, the statewide leaders in investigations and risk mitigation. Visit sharplineinvestigations.com or call 855-394-0042.
Welcome back. You are in my world, the world of Laurie Zoock. And now I have one of my favorite guests, Dr. Marlene Siegel. She's a veterinarian, and she's my veterinarian, and I have 2 Great Danes, and my Great Danes have some sensitive tummy issues. So I have difficulty feeding them regular dog food. And then, of course, Marlene gave me, a whole conversation about what I should be feeding, and therefore we've switched. So, Marlene, first let me welcome you back to the show.
Oh, Laurie, it's always so much fun to do these with you. I really appreciate it.
Well, you've really sold me on the differences between dog foods and also raw food diets. Now, we recently went to a network meeting together where you stood up, and maybe you can repeat for our listeners what you said about feeding the proper diet.
Well, it's very important that any species, whether we're talking about dogs, cats, horses, people, or whatever, eat what we call a species-appropriate diet. And a species-appropriate diet is the diet that they were designed before we had all this processed food going on. What were they designed to actually eat? And it's a really important topic because, for instance, you and I are what are called omnivores. We were designed to eat carbohydrates and proteins and fruits and all kinds of different foods. And we know that because we have an enzyme in our saliva called amylase. So when we eat properly and we chew our food until it's like a slurry, then we know that we're mixing that amylase in with our food product, the carbohydrates, and that's where the carbohydrate digestion begins, is in our mouth. Well, nature doesn't waste energy. It doesn't do something that isn't necessary. And so dogs and cats do not have amylase in their mouth. There's none in their saliva. So they were not designed to eat carbohydrates. The significance there is that most processed foods are, if not predominantly carbohydrates, they're very high in carbohydrates. And that has some serious effects on the body over a long period of time.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in for a moment. So basically you're talking about processed dog food as in kibble, hard kibble.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Go on.
Well, kibble or can, because anything that's been heated and extruded above 105 degrees is considered processed.
Okay.
Okay? So we were talking, and you sent me an article that I just thought was phenomenal, and it was an independent research study which reviewed over 2,000 dog foods. And what was marvelous about this study is that they didn't differentiate it based on whether it was raw or processed. They literally looked at the ingredients in the food. They looked at the companies. Did they have recalls? Did the items come from questionable places? And they did a phenomenal job on this research. They had 7 researchers, 20 expert contributors. They put over 1,400 man-hours into this study, and they surveyed over 300 dog owners, and they reviewed 72 different articles and studies. So they did a really thorough job in reviewing these foods.
Now, one of the things that I read also in the survey is the different types of food. When we were talking about disqualifying them, one of the statements made was that it was almost impossible to tell what was being rendered. It can be roadkill, zoo animals, and sometimes even spoiled meat from the grocery store that's still wrapped in plastic. Well, first off, to me, that's really frightening that I'd be feeding my pet something like that. But people don't even know, right?
That's the sad part, is that we are not educated on reading labels, and we certainly aren't educated on knowing what those names on the label means, because rendered food sounds kind of innocuous.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really be alerted that that would be something bad until you go look up the definition of rendered foods, and then it becomes very frightening.
I sit here and I go, okay, so you're saying, let me just repeat back, that the processed foods, yeah, it sounds like people eat processed foods. You know, they genetically modified foods. People don't know necessarily what they're eating, but for the pets, maybe part of it is how it is being labeled, because if I looked at something, well, rendered food or rendered tankage is the other term. Without reading this article, I would have had no idea what that meant. And when you read a list of ingredients on food, you know, first off, most of them have tons of chemicals in them. By the time you even get to anything that's meat, it looks like garbage.
Well, and that's certainly true for our food also. So many people are really not conscious of what they're putting in their mouth, and it's scary. But as far as the pets go, they don't have a choice on what they're eating. You know, the average person, if they want to eat something that's terribly unhealthy, well, they made that choice and they're going to pay the consequences. But the poor pet, they don't have a choice. They're just going to eat whatever's put down in front of them. There's another comment that I get a lot from people who mean well but don't really have a lot of education, and they'll say to me, well, they've eaten this all their life. And they think that that is a reason to not suspect that there's anything wrong with the food. Well, here's the problem. I'm going to give you an analogy. If you were driving your car and one day you just decided, I don't feel like putting gasoline in my car. It's way too expensive. Let me put some water in the gas tank, or let me put some sand in the gas tank and see how well it does. Well, we all know that your car won't go very far for very long with something like that in it. So it's a no-brainer that we don't put things that are inappropriate into the gas tank of our car because it has no mechanism to adapt to it. The human and the pet model, however, have this amazing mechanism called adaptation, and it's going to try and survive almost no matter what. And so we don't notice the things that are going on in the body because they're very insidious. They're slow growing and they're slow damages. So you don't make the association. But if every time you ate something that was toxic, a brick fell on your head, it wouldn't take very long before you wouldn't eat that product again because you know it's going to hurt you.
Right.
Well, unfortunately, the brick that falls is chronic disease, cancer, arthritis. All these things are bricks that are a result of eating inappropriate foods over a long period of time. We overwhelm the immune system, and then we can't survive that. The adaptation mechanism just can't hang in there that long.
Right, but with people, you can speak. Unless you're a baby, you can speak and you realize that there's something wrong. But with your pet, they can't speak to you other than maybe having symptoms where you have to be observant to be able to recognize them, correct?
And symptoms are the most profound opportunity that we have to pay attention. And that is true for people, too. I mean, how many times do people get a headache and they just take an aspirin, the headache goes away, and they never stop to ask, why did I get the headache? And it's a really important question. So we really need to be paying attention to the symptoms that we're seeing in our pets and in ourselves, and start asking those questions as to, is this caused by perhaps something I'm eating? Maybe it's inappropriate. What could I eat that would be better? And as we become more educated, we're really doing a lot better job at cleaning up our diets. So I think there's really a lot of hope out there because people are becoming much more savvy. They're becoming educated, and they're not putting up with a lot of the CRAP stuff that's out there. They're becoming more willing to pay for the differences so that they could have something that's healthy.
Right. I mean, I read through the list that some of the things that were cut were name brand foods. Eukanuba, Hill's Prescription Diet and Science Diet, Imes Veterinary. These were cut. There was heavy duty criteria determined for the foods that were good. I recognize Stella's because I feed that to my dog. A lot of these brands I had not heard of before, and I'm guessing they're probably really not much more expensive than what is garbage, correct?
Absolutely. So it's very affordable to feed a healthy diet. It's all a matter of becoming educated and knowing what you're looking for. The article did a great job at listing the things that you don't want to have in your diet and also things that would be good to have in your diet. So the good things are things like the grass-fed meats, and of course meat being the first ingredients that you want to have in that food, organic fruits and vegetables for that small 5% that you have in there. I still prefer to have a raw diet because if it's processed, you still lose the enzymes that are in there, and it's important to have those enzymes in the pet diet. It's very critical for them. And if you do feed a processed food, at least add digestive enzymes in a plant-based form. And, of course, the probiotics. We use kefir, which is a fermented milk, to make sure we get those good bacteria back into the gut. But the things to avoid are things like propylene glycol, BHA, BHT, meat, meal, and meat byproducts, corn, wheat, soy, beet pulp. The worst thing about the beet pulp is that it's not organic. It's one of the most concentrated toxins that are left over from beet production.
People really have to look at it, and I'm sure as a veterinarian, you see when something's wrong with a pet that it might be something with their diet. And I want to thank you because you always give out such great information. Do you have a Facebook page where people can go maybe and see that study that we've been talking about?
Absolutely. Go to my website, which is it's pascovet.com. pascovet.com. Click on the link to the Facebook, and it'll take you right there.
Great. Thank you so much for joining me again, Marlene. Like I said, always give out great information. We'll have you back on again soon.
Thanks, Laurie. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. And thank you for joining me on the World of Laurie Zoock. Smart, sexy, and savvy. I'm here to help you every week. Take care.